you'd be shocked by the comments or the findings of this court. Basically, the judge finds that housing is a protected right. And like that's the first time I have ever seen that in Canadian law, and that's a protected charter right.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law. Gavin Ty here with Stephen Teal. Stephen, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm so. I'm a little bit under the weather, my friend Gavin. What can I tell you?
That's just because you're back in the land of perpetual winter from the sunny climes of other far more exotic destinations. Good for you, though.
Well, it was good to get away, but still had to do some work, and that's just the way that life is. But I was in a sunnier location and enjoying a hobby and visiting a wonderful couple of museums where Gavin, one of these museum owners, found $450 million in treasure coins. So I'd like to be going back there soon.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a pretty good day. So I guess this fellow is not sleeping in a tent.
No, well, that fellow is dead, but he's definitely not sleeping in a tent, and I actually didn't see any tents. But I think we will be talking about tents.
That's always amazed me when we talk about tents. Like, you have to wonder. I got to tell you, if you know, and I listen, there's no doubt that homelessness is a terrible affliction. But if you had to be homeless, I don't know that I'd pick Canada. Gotta tell you, I can think of a lot of tropical beaches that would just be really great to lie out on, But hey, maybe that's just me, that a cold street corner, Portage in Maine and Winnipeg would not be my choice.
Well, I don't know, Gavin. I guess maybe the laws are different in some other countries that if you pitched a tent and started living in it, somebody might do something, i.e. the police, and they might remove you from your temporary abode.
Yeah, like I have to say, like, we're really becoming the old geezers of the internet on this podcast. But, there've always been, bad thing to call it up, hobos or bums or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want, whatever generation has their name for people who are down on their luck. But I have to say that it's become an absolute epidemic in urban centers across Ontario. It's beyond comprehension. I don't know if that's many people will point fingers all over the place, but I can't recall a time where there have been more social safety net sort of handouts by government for all sorts of outreach programs. If you name it, programs that did not exist 30, 40 years ago. And yet homelessness and, people living on the streets and, is at it, certainly from an anecdotal perspective, an all-time high, to the point where it's mind-boggling to me how many people are literally living on our streets.
It makes no sense
when we supposedly have this great system that protects them. That's certainly more than it did 30 years ago.
Well, look, it makes no sense, Gavin, given the size of Canada, one, and we have a significant social safety net. I mean, we're not and we don't have the density, right? We're not a country with billions of people where you see shanty towns.
Well, you do now.
Yeah, well, we're seeing it now.
You're seeing shanty towns within cities, but I mean, right. They seem to be. I mean, the only thing I can think of, and I'm certainly not pretending to be a social scientist, although, as we're going to talk about in this podcast, it seems that law school qualifies one to be a social scientist. But in any event, the only thing I can think of is drugs. That right. we've seen a complete a devolution in drugs from what they were 30, 40 years ago to what they are today. Fentanyl, basically synthetic heroin, it has become so prolific and on the streets, and various derivations of it, without meth and all sorts of other lovely cocktail ingredients that have just destroyed people's lives to the point where I guess that is their existence, is just living from one fix to the next.
Well, and it's a very addictive drug. It's not like the classic, I guess, heroin or cocaine that people were addicted to in the past. But
I don't think it's cocaine. I think it's fake heroin. I think it's fentanyl, which wasn't around as far, it wasn't around 30 years ago. It is around now. And anyways, what we see is frankly a blight on urban centers all across Ontario for sure. I mean, you see it in California. Certainly, it's very, very significant there. I was in New York City recently. I did not see a significant amount of homelessness there. Certainly nothing uh, relative to the size of Toronto. One would have thought if that were, if it were directly an issue, that you'd see that, that amount, but you didn't really see that, as opposed to Toronto, which is frankly downtown core is at the point of being almost overrun in certain places with homeless people. And we're going to talk about a case today that came out just last week out of the regional municipality of Waterloo. And I've been down in various centers in southwestern Ontario, London, Kitchener, Waterloo, Windsor, and there's a significant homeless problem in that part of the province.
yeah, and quite frankly, Gavin, I don't understand that. That's not where I would be heading if I were a homeless person. But it could be the drug. I don't know.
Maybe this case explains it, because what we saw in what happened for many people who've been following the news cycle was the most recent case out of Waterloo was an order from Superior Court that basically prohibited the city from clearing out a homeless encampment which had, which has been on this site for 5, 6 years at a minimum, maybe longer,
At least 5 years.
which is a public parking lot. So a public parking lot has been completely taken over in the city of, I guess it's Kitchener, in the
Kitchener.
district regional municipality of Waterloo. And the city has been basically rendered powerless to clear it out.
Yeah, they've been in court battles, I guess, for the last 3 or 4 years with a couple of different bylaws. We actually may have spoken about the original decision.
Yeah,
we
we did.
certainly blogged about it 3 years ago, where the judge issued an injunction on the general bylaw, and then Waterloo, or the region of Waterloo, went back and created a site-specific bylaw for this gravel parking lot. And that's gone to court now, and as you said, a decision came out, and in a nutshell, the court found that the site-specific bylaw was unconstitutional. So I'm not sure what the region of Waterloo is going to do there.
Well, I mean, it struck me as odd from a legal perspective that the way this progressed originally was that the regional municipality, I have to be clear, it's a regional government, not there's the city governments and the regional government, but the regional government actually went to court for an order to say, I guess, the blessing of the court on the constitutionality of its bylaw, and ended up with an injunction against itself that it couldn't enforce its bylaw. That's a remarkable turn of phrase. You go to court and end up with an injunction against you. It's not someone else seeking that injunction. It's that you're the one who started the court proceedings. How do you explain that?
I don't understand procedurally what the lawyers for the region of Waterloo are doing. I would have rather been in a respondent position rather than being an applicant. But Maybe the history of this entire case is such that the government lawyers or the region lawyers decided that they would actually test their bylaw, and they lost. And it's a little bit incomprehensible to me, given that they're the applicant, that they appeared not to have enough evidence. Because I really find, Gavin, that this case turned on expert sociological kind of evidence about homelessness, and that the bylaw couldn't pass the test that these experts basically came up with, or with respect to their evidence of the impacts of homelessness, etc., and how many bed spaces were available and not available, and that really impacted the uh, uh, judge's reasons, and he struck down this bylaw as being unconstitutional, even though it wasn't passed in bad faith.
Yeah, I mean, I think the case really, to me, marks the high watermark of social engineering by the courts, to basically overrule the duly elected democratic government, in this case the municipal government, from implementing what are effectively municipal bylaws. I mean, I would have thought that a pretty simple municipal bylaw would be, if I can't leave my car in the parking lot um, indefinitely without paying, I would assume that if I put a tent in the parking lot, I can't over my car, I can't leave my car there. So in other words, I can't use the property for my own purposes, that doesn't belong to me. That would seems to me a pretty basic proposition of any property owner, including a municipality. And it would seem a pretty basic proposition that a city can enforce its own bylaws, in the sense that if my car overholds in the parking spot, they can tow it. And so I don't know. Here we have people who were squatting, for lack of a better word, in the parking lot, and for years. And the city has basically been left too bad. They basically have a constitutional right, constitutionally protected right to camp in the parking lot. I mean, I think it's a remarkable proposition when we think about the evolution of the law. And it is an evolution. These cases started out in British Columbia, in the Abbotsford case, and what began as a narrow constitutional protection against freezing to death outdoors has evolved into courts increasingly supervising homelessness policy itself. And I think the Waterloo decision is one of the clearest examples of that shift.
Well, it's look, I think it's a certainly, if you're a conservative, you'd be shocked by the comments or the findings of this court. Basically, the judge finds that housing is a protected right. And that's the first time I have ever seen that in Canadian law. And that's a protected charter right. So are we now heading down some kind of slippery slope of what courts are going to find in other cases in terms of what are protected rights under either Section 7 or Section 15 of the Charter? Is guaranteed income now a charter right?
Maybe. I mean, I think what the case does is it moves Canada away from equality before the law toward differentiated constitutional treatment based on socioeconomic status. And that socioeconomic status is not a class of differentiation, which was constitutionally protected before, like race, religion, uh, you know, the rights based upon your economic position, were not. I would have thought it were protected. Apparently, there's a new theory that they are. That Section 15 protects them.
Well, that's certainly what the judge finds. I guess the Supreme Court of Canada has been making certain decisions, and there's a recent one, Kenyinda, I guess it's what it's called, um, where the judge relies on that. Although I find that case to be completely distinguishable because that was discrimination based on gender. This case is not discrimination based on gender.
Although that was part of the analysis, was that there was a failure to consult with what were apparently considered to be affected groups. I think there was indigenous groups, LGBTQ groups. That there were the reasoning was they were overrepresented in the homeless population. Therefore, you had a duty to consult with those groups before passing any law. Isn't that part of the analysis?
That is part of the analysis. But what I find remarkable is who do you consult with if you're dealing with like
the title of proceedings is against, quote, persons unknown.
right?
How do you consult with people you don't know who they are?
So are they supposed to consult with social agencies or
yes, this was
certain
advocacy
social justice groups?
Exactly. So I think it's important for us. Let's just sort of take a step back. I just want to. I mean, the evolution of where we are now from where we started really started, I think, with a case called Victoria and Adams back in 2008, which was originally a British Columbia case. It was relatively speaking, compared to the most recent decision, quite restrained. And what the court started out there was to say if there aren't enough shelter beds, homeless people have a charter right to erect temporary overnight shelter. That's very different than an encampment. It's to sort of say, well, if it's -10 and you don't have a place for me to sleep, I have a right to wake up in the morning and to survive the night and to put up a tent to do it. It was framed as a basic survival issue, not a constitutional right to occupy public land indefinitely. Then we had a case, Abbotsford, and the later BC cases, which the courts gradually expanded the doctrine, and judges started looking not just at shelter numbers, but whether shelters were practically accessible or appropriate, whatever that means. And I mean, I don't know exactly what that means, is to say whether or not it was preferable to homeless people to stay in their tents or whether they preferred, to go into the shelters. And there was all sorts of evidence. Oh, well, people steal my stuff and in the shelter, I don't want to go there. Pausing parenthetically, that if my admittedly uneducated and unresearched thesis is correct, that, drug addicts tend to be overrepresented in these shelters. One of the things I think that happens in these encampments, one of the things that happens in shelters is that they take your drugs away and you can't use when you're in the shelter. Of course, when you're in your tent in the encampment, you're free to do whatever you like. So, I mean, looking at this from the perspective of a drug addict, what do I prefer? Do I prefer a setting where I'm free to use my drug to which I'm addicted and basically is my life, or do I go into a shelter bed where I can't? I mean, I think ultimately that's probably, again, my uneducated, unresearched, but I think common sense perspective would be that's probably why, if I had the choice, and I'm not saying people have choices, that's part of the thing, is that they didn't have a choice, but one can see why one would prefer one over the other. Then we have the Waterloo decision in 2023. And what that was the court scrutinized municipal decision-making in detail. And the judge looked at addiction issues, disabilities, trauma, shelter suitability, and the practical consequences of being evicted from the encampment. And at that point, the court's really no longer simply enforcing negative rights in the sense that you have a right not to die overnight because of the cold. They started to really get into the shaping of public administration policy. I think the latest chapter in that now is really about how far should the courts go.
No, I don't think the court should actually be involved in public policy making, but this decision certainly suggests that. It's an 88-page decision, Gavin, and I gotta tell you, from a research lawyer perspective, how many cases did the judge actually cite and rely upon? Less than 5?
Yeah.
No, it's but it
it's experts. We have the dictatorship of the expert. the
But it
experts
reads like
called
it reads like an essay.
no, the experts that were called in these cases, in these Section 7 cases, we do have the bike lane case here in Toronto, which has been argued in front of the Court of Appeal, but a decision is reserved. I do think the bike lane case may give us some guidance on where the appeal courts see this going. But at this point, look, and look, I want to be fair here. I mean, we both have views on this. I agree, and I've my own personal viewpoint is, courts are not social policy makers. That's why we vote governments in. That's what a democracy is about. When we don't elect our judges. Judges are there, as a bit of a check and a balance on government in regards to the charter, but they're not there to replace government. And I think that courts are responding to what they perceive to be real human suffering, and no judge wants a situation where people are forced into life-threatening conditions. And they will say that the courts have stepped in because the government's failed to solve the problem. But sympathy does not eliminate constitutional limits on judicial power, in my view. And I think if we're not butting up against them, we're pretty much over them.
Yeah, well, again, Gavin, when you read what the judge says about the temporary encampment, it's not a great place, right? You're right in terms of this particular encampment that's spanned
These
over
are
5
horrible
years.
places.
There's been deaths, physical violence, the use of drugs, and basically grants an injunction to keep the encampment in place. It's filthy. There's rat droppings or mouse droppings. There's urine. There's feces. There's all kinds of things.
No, this is disgusting.
So how are you helping these people? And quite frankly, there's a potential health issue within the vicinity of that encampment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a legal perspective, I mean, many people have different views on homelessness and the causes and its remedies. But I think from my perspective, it's really the democratic concern here is not compassion, is who's more compassionate than the next. It's really what is the institutional role of the court? What is the institutional role of the democratically elected government? And really and I mean, the judge even talked about this, about, are the courts getting into the institutional role of the government? Are they getting in their lane, to quote the judge? And I think they are.
Yeah, I think he's definitely crossed into a different
And
lane.
I mean, remember, one of the things that governments deal with when they're talking about resolving social problems like homelessness or addressing them. I know it's resolving. I mean, these are Band-Aid solutions. Homeless shelters aren't resolving homelessness. I mean, they're Band-Aids that get you through the night. They're not solutions that change lives, I wouldn't think. But governments have to deal with a whole series of issues. Who's going to pay for it? Where is it going to go? Who is how are we going to implement these policies? And what is our budget to do it? I mean, it's easy for a court to say, no, you shall provide these spots, but without any consideration of how are they supposed to do it? Who's going to pay for it?
Well, and in that regard, if you look at the statistics that are quoted in the decision, the region of Waterloo more than doubled its spending on trying to accommodate people who are homeless. They have unsheltered support workers who are trying to work with people who are homeless, who may have, various kinds of disabilities, whether it's an addiction disability or mental health disability. The region has been spending a lot of money. And with respect to this particular site, they're nearly spending $1 million.
No, but with no success, because what the statistics that were put forward in the hearing is that despite the fact that they've doubled their spending, they've also doubled the number of homeless people. So if the purpose of the spending is to theoretically reduce homelessness, it ain't working. It's throwing more money at these kind of problems to, address what I'm going to call the temporary fix of get you through the night. And getting through the night is pretty important. You can't get to next week unless you get through tonight. I'm not discounting that, but this sort of these permanent, like, put more band-aids on is not working.
Well, and maybe
If the
it's a
statistics mean
misdirection.
anything.
It's a misallocation of where the funds are going. Maybe we need to spend the funds in bricks and mortar. Maybe you need to, I hate to say it, but maybe you need to look at institutionalization, right? And turn the clock backwards for people who have mental health issues, right? Instead of allowing them to live on the street like we're continuing to do at this point in time.
It seems to be like I find it. I mean, maybe the advent of fentanyl, etc. Maybe I'm right. Maybe that has changed things fundamentally. But human beings haven't changed in a long time. People, there have always been, sadly, people with mental illness, people who are difficulty in socializing. And again, there's no doubt, anecdotal or not, there is no doubt that homelessness is a million times worse now than it was 30 years ago. So what were they doing 30 years ago that they're not doing now? Or what are they doing now that they weren't doing 30 years ago that is the cause and effect?
Well, if you were a right-wing person, you would say that a certain federal government allowed too many people into the country.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Created this homeless crisis in
No,
10
I don't
cities.
think that's that. I don't believe that for a minute. I mean, I think that just misses the point too.
You're forgetting the commercials from the last election, Gavin.
No, I think the reality of it is that if there was an economic model to build houses, there would be lots of people who would build them. If there was money to be made in building houses, you find thousands of people willing to do it. The problem is that if what you get into affordable housing is you're saying build houses that you're going to lose money building, and nobody's going to do that. That's a whole other conversation. We have lots of room in this country. It's a big place. And if there was enough incentive, people would build it. But, I come back to the point that this sort of, we need more of this, we need more of that, we need more support on this, we need support on that. It just seems to me that what the result of that has been, if maybe not, but there sure are a lot more homeless people than there were before all these supports existed. So has it become easier to let people fall into homelessness? Has it become more comfortable? You don't get arrested. There's no vagrancy law anymore. People don't get arrested if they're on the street. I mean, they certainly did, 30 years ago. If someone was, wandering on, they would get arrested. They'd be in the back of a police car. I think now the police don't go near them. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is institutionalize it. Maybe it is the fact we bring back the old vagrancy laws. Maybe we make it a crime again to sleep on the street. But these rulings say that would be unconstitutional.
Well, I don't know. Well, you probably would have it being declared unconstitutional, but look, I don't think this decision actually helps and I think it's like 20 campers in this parking lot. It's not very many, but we're not helping these 20 people very much.
There were more lawyers in the courtroom than there were campers.
Well, so it seems.
If you look at the title of proceedings, there must have been 30 lawyers there, all being paid. If you took the money on the litigation, and you would be able to buy these people hotel rooms.
No, but look, I mean, Gavin, perhaps maybe somebody needs to begin to think outside the box with respect to solutions to deal with people who are homeless. There's lots of land available in Canada. There's lots of land available, I'm sure, in Waterloo region to maybe provide spaces that are not as horrible as this particular parking lot seems to be. But to also provide supports. I don't know.
But look at Toronto. Downtown Toronto. Homeless people seem to be a larger.
Just go down to Union Station.
Exactly, in the heart of the city. They're not out, in some forest in the middle of, northern Ontario where there's nobody for 100 miles. So homelessness is an urban problem in urban centers, and that's where homeless people seem to gravitate towards for whatever reason. I think that ultimately, I mean, the problem you're going to run into is if governments can't pass legislation to deal with this, what other tool do governments have? If the courts are going to say your legislation dealing with homelessness, i.e., time to move on, um, is unconstitutional, what are governments supposed to do?
I don't know. It's a great question, Gavin. I think at the end of the day, all governments can really do is allocate more and more money to this.
Or I think we're going to see with a lot of these social engineering decisions, which is where the court replaces its policy judgments for those of elected officials. Municipalities can't use the notwithstanding clause, but provincial governments can certainly do so.
Well, and you and I talked about this. The one key fact about this parking lot is that it was supposed to be used, or it has a future use, to expand the transportation network in that area. And, Premier Ford is extremely upset with this decision. So what does Premier Ford do now? Does he go to the region of Waterloo or Kitchener and say, we'll buy your parking lot, and then pass his own law to say that, we're clearing this encampment and use the notwithstanding clause?
That's one route that could be taken. But look, for those of us who believe in, I believe in democracy and I believe in the charter. It is possible to believe in both. I oftentimes do not agree with governments and their position, but I like the fact that every 4 years I get to vote them out. And I like courts that review laws, and I like that, but I don't want to be governed by a judiciary that's not elected, no more than I want to be governed by a monarchy that's not elected. So I think, really, this is always been my fear, is that when courts push beyond the reasonable limits of what the charter is intended to protect, it will only bend so far before it breaks. And if it becomes too easy to use and too politically, comfortable to use the notwithstanding clause because of decisions that the majority of people disagree with. And I would suggest that if a poll were to be taken, most people would disagree with the outcome here. It becomes a lot easier for governments to pull that trigger and just use the notwithstanding clause, kind of like they do in Quebec.
Right.
Almost routinely. And in any event, I hope that doesn't come to pass, but I do think that courts and judges with power comes responsibility.
But on that note, Gavin, there is a potentially scary, I'm going to put that in quotes, decision that will be coming out from the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah, and
with respect to the
hack
scope of the notwithstanding clause.
Right.
So does the court then narrow that too?
Well, listen, the other part is I can't recall which of the justices, but one is retiring, and that decision has to be released before, I think, October. And there's a provincial election in Quebec. And I wonder if that decision comes out and the court purports to limit the ability of the provincial government in Quebec, I think you're going to see that to be a significant election issue in Quebec, and one that might, Canada and Quebec separation has been a bit of a sleeping dragon for a few years, might awaken it.
Well, they didn't sign on to the charter in Quebec, and
no, but the release valve has been the notwithstanding clause, and if that's limited, if it's taken away from them or purported to be taken away from them, I think that could be a serious election issue in Quebec. We'll see what comes out of the Supreme Court of Canada on that. But
and anyway, this is
careful.
This is a remarkable decision. We've got the Premier talking about it. what I find remarkable in the decision as well, Gavin, is that it doesn't speak to what other judges have said, that the charter does not protect illegalities. And the judge just kind of sweepingly says, well, even though the city is a occupant under the Trespass Act, they still have to be bound by the charter. So does that mean anybody can now trespass on public lands if it breaches their charter rights? That's what he seems to suggest. Other courts haven't found that. So, I would commend the region of Waterloo probably appealing this decision, and this one will end up in the Supreme Court of Canada as well one day.
I think there's going to be a lot of roads leading to Ottawa with regards to all this. Anyways, we are way over time. This was a hot topic of the moment. We thought that our listeners would enjoy our perspective, or not. Many people will disagree with us, think we're completely unfeeling and uncaring and unsympathetic. I think the answer to that is we're not. Just have different views on how to solve the problem. In any event, always brings it back to the one point, Stephen. We're all living under this, but if no one is above the law, everyone is beneath it. Thanks again. Thanks to Doug Downs, our producer. Please rate us on wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, have a good day and watch where you camp.